I think it's basically the popular opinion at this point, inside and out of the Pokemon community, that Ash Ketchum is a bad trainer. I mean, have you seen the Twitch chat on the Pokemon marathons? Christ, I haven't seen such basic opinions since 2012. But anyways, there's always been a lot of misconceptions about the Pokemon anime that lead a lot of people to believe that Ash Ketchum is a bad trainer, or that some events should have played out differently than they actually did. So today, I'm going to be taking a look at some of the common Pokemon anime criticisms aimed at Ash and explaining why they actually do make sense. You guys are just mean. Let's start with the big meme of the Twitch chat, the pity badge. This joke goes all the way back to the first season of the anime, where Ash would often never complete his gym battles but still got the badge anyways, probably because of defeating Team Rocket or something like that. What the Twitch chat refers to as a pity badge. People will still say this even though he won fair and square, so that's probably just some exaggeration on their part, but I think we should take a look at how many badges he earned versus how many were actual pity badges. Starting with Brock, he beat him legit, though the sprinkler thing I guess could be up for debate. He never finished his battle with Misty, so I guess that qualifies as a pity badge. Lieutenant Surge was fair and square. He never finished his battles with Sabrina or Erica, so those are 2 more pity badges. Koga and Blaine were also legit, with the Earth badge being probably up for debate considering Team Rocket weren't actually the gym leaders, but he did defeat them in battle, so I think that counts as a legit badge. That's only 3 pity badges out of the first 8, so that's not as bad as it's made out to be, and it only really gets better from there. The rest of his badges were legit, with some arguments possibly being made for Price and Johto, who forfeited, Watson and Hoenn, who technically wasn't at full power, and Maylene and Sinnoh, whom Ash tied with. But every other gym battle other than that, Ash won fair and square. No sprinklers, no pity badges. This rumor is bogus, yo. Now let's talk about another gripe that fans tend to have, Pikachu. For years and years, fans have been wondering why Ash's Pikachu hasn't evolved yet, and why Ash keeps a lot of his Pokemon unevolved. The out-of-universe explanation for this is obviously marketing and brand recognition. Pikachu is literally the mascot of the entire franchise, so it would make no sense that the main character of the long-running show to have a Raichu. Trust me, I love Raichu as much as the next guy, it's my favorite Pokemon, but that just doesn't make any sense at all. Pikachu needs to stay Pikachu for the Pokemon brand. It's that simple, and I don't know how people don't understand this. When it comes to his other Pokemon, the cute ones will stay small and cute like most starters, while ones with cool evolutions will evolve like Charizard and Crocodile. In-universe, it's been explained multiple times that Pikachu does not want to evolve, and since Ash respects his Pokemon, he lets Pikachu do what he wants, and that's to stay as a Pikachu. In regards to his other Pokemon, I often hear this argument. Man, why doesn't Ash evolve his Pokemon? That's why he loses every league.
That is without a doubt the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
My problem with this argument comes mostly with the wording of it. People say this as if it's the games, and Ash can just level his Bulbasaur up to level 16, and boom, Ivysaur. And we'll get to levels in a minute, but this is not how this works in the anime. The way I see it, Pokemon evolution in the anime works a lot like a Dragon Ball Z transformation. Once a Pokemon has achieved a certain quote-unquote power level, which the anime shows by more powerful moves and such, then the Pokemon can choose whether or not it wants to evolve. A lot of times when Ash's Pokemon do evolve, it's because they need to avoid a bad situation, like losing a gym battle or losing to Team Rocket, and other times it's just because they wanted to. Most of his Pokemon who have not evolved did so by choice or never wanted to in the first place. In some cases, there were entire episodes dedicated to certain Pokemon not wanting to evolve, like with Bulbasaur, and it even applies to other trainers like Dawn's Piplup. Ash has a track record of never forcing a Pokemon to do anything that it didn't want to do, and even when he did do so unknowingly, he quickly corrected himself. He lets his Pokemon evolve when they feel it is appropriate. People act like Ash has a choice in his Pokemon's evolution, like he can just command it to evolve, and it will, but they don't take the Pokemon's choice into account, and that's just the type of trainer that Ash is. When was the last time you were watching an anime and you saw a trainer look at its Pokemon and say, "Evolve," and then it just evolves? It doesn't work like that. It doesn't happen. Circling back to Pikachu, and we're gonna get real controversial here, let's talk about Latios and Snivy. I'm sure you all already know where I'm going with this one, but if you don't know, in the final episodes of Diamond and Pearl, Ash battles against a trainer named Tobias in the Sinnoh League. The dude sweeps his whole team with a Darkrai, Ash manages to finally take that thing out, and then he has to fight this dude's second Pokemon, which is a Latios. The battle ends with Pikachu and Latios both fainting and Ash losing the battle. Fast forward a few more episodes and we get to Black and White. Ash meets Trip and wants to battle. This dude calls out his Snivy that he just got and beats Ash. I think we all know the song and dance by now. The argument here that many people like to make, especially in regards to Ash's character in Black and White, is that Ash's Pikachu should have easily beaten Trip's Snivy. After all, Ash has had 4 regions of battle experience on his side, while Trip just started his journey that day with an untrained Snivy, so surely it would be an easy win. But no, Ash loses. From a writing perspective, this was very obviously done to make Trip seem like more of a rival for Ash in this generation, and since Gen 5 for both the anime and the games was meant to be a soft reboot of sorts, Ash was scaled down a little to introduce new kids to the show. That's whatever, I'm okay with all that, but what bothers me are these in-universe explanations that are there and ever clearly present, but fans will willfully ignore because ha ha ha, Black and White was bad. Listen here, I don't much care for Black and White either, but you gotta look at things rationally here. People seem to be under the impression that there are levels in the anime, and like I said, I will get to that, so they assume that Ash's Pikachu must be level 100 by now, when in reality, Pikachu was never Ash's best Pokemon to begin with. He's far from his worst Pokemon, but certainly not his best by any means. When people make this argument that his Pikachu defeated a Latios and then lost to a Snivy, they willingly leave out the context of both situations. It's not like Pikachu had an easy time defeating that Latios. In fact, most of his attacks barely did anything when both of them were already slightly weakened from the battle before. Pikachu may have beaten this Latios, but it was no easy feat. He essentially cheesed his way to victory by hopping on Latios' back and hammering away with Thunderbolts. If Ash's Pikachu and Tobias' Latios were to go against each other at full power, rather than both of them being weakened, Pikachu would not stand a chance. So yeah, Pikachu did win against the Latios, but just barely. When it comes to Snivy, Pikachu was severely underpowered in that fight. Pikachu didn't have access to Thunderbolt or Volt Tackle, two of his most powerful attacks, and Trip, even though this was his first battle, seemed to know a fair bit about Pokemon battles beforehand, so it's not like he's some nameless trainer with no concept of battling. Pikachu is not as strong as most people make him out to be, so it's not entirely surprising to me that he could barely beat a Latios and still lose to a Snivy at half power. I guess the point here is that people will willfully ignore blatant information that's present to them in the show just for the sake of making fun of it. Moving on from that, let's finally talk about levels in the anime. I think to any rational person it's fairly obvious that levels are not a thing in the anime the way that they are in the games. People have tried to apply game logic to the anime since the beginning, and though the anime did start out with some of that stuff, they quickly phased it out because it would just not work with the kind of story they wanted to tell. If you want proof as to why levels don't exist, then take a look at Bulbasaur, for example. Bulbasaur made it through 2 regions and the Orange Islands, taking on Pokemon way stronger than itself, and there is no way it was under level 16 at that point if levels existed in the anime. Even in the episode where it was going to evolve, Bulbasaur's Mysterious Garden, there is no way it would be such a low level if we're applying game mechanics. This took place between Ash's battles against Koga and Blaine between Gym 6 and 7, meaning if we're applying game mechanics, there's no way he could be such a low level at this point, which therefore proves that levels do not exist in the anime. If you still deny this, you are delusional. Oh, but what about some of the times where other characters mention, levels? Those can be easily misconstrued into the game version of levels. For example, in an episode of X and Y, Clement is explaining to Bonnie how Pokemon evolution works, and he mentions when a Pokemon hits a certain level. That doesn't mean it hits a numerical level. That means it just becomes a certain level of power. It's not level 14 or level 16, it's just I'm stronger, I'm at this level of power now. There's no numbers applied to it. It's not how the anime works. I don't even know why I'm touching this one with a 10-foot pole because honestly it doesn't even matter that much, but I'm just gonna do this to get it out of the way. Why do people care that Ash is quote-unquote forever 10 years old? It's a cartoon. Who cares? Listen, I like time skips as much as the next guy, but it doesn't matter how old he is. You could literally disregard the throwaway 10 years old line from Black and White episode 1, and it would change nothing. In my headcanon, every episode is about a day, and with over 1,000 episodes, it's been almost 3 years, making Ash 13 at most by Sun and Moon. But that's not the real canon. The real canon is that his age doesn't matter. Just watch a children's show and shut up. But anyways, let's get back to Ash. More specifically, why does he lose all the time, and is he worthy of a league win? Let's go through this in chronological order, shall we? So in the Indigo League, it makes perfect sense that he would lose this league, and I think most fans tend to be okay with that. He was inexperienced, 3 of his badges were illegitimate, and he simply wasn't ready to take on most of the trainers there. He was way below the bar at that point. So it makes perfect sense that he would lose to trainers who didn't have that kind of coddling. The Orange Islands, while most people claim it doesn't count, makes sense that he would win. It was a smaller scale league that wasn't as tough as the real leagues, but it was perfect for him to truly ease into being a trainer. It's like trying to fight the final boss without taking out all the enemies first. You gotta start small and then work your way up, and Ash started way too big in the Indigo League, so the Orange Islands was a fresh start, great for him to ease into things. Again, most people don't count this one, so I don't feel the need to fully explain it, but it's kind of supplementary to the Indigo League. The Orange Islands were exactly what Ash needed to truly ease into being a Pokemon trainer, which pretty much put him on par with many of the trainers in Johto. With Johto, while Ash may have lost in the end, he still finally managed to beat Gary, which brings that whole arc and rivalry to an end after 5 seasons. Out of universe, it makes sense that he would lose to Harrison as well, because with his Hoenn Pokemon, it pushes Ash to want to travel to Hoenn, so it's less of a character improving kind of thing and more of a transitioning to the next gen kind of thing. In universe, it could also make sense, because Hoenn is way different than Johto or Kanto, so Ash would not have any idea how to deal with, say, a Blaziken, for example, even though he did have the type advantage with Charizard. Hoenn, if you ask me, was a very stagnant generation for Ash. He didn't really noticeably improve, he didn't really get worse. He was just kind of the same as he was in Johto throughout that gen. As a result, it's the league that I remember the least because it was not as memorable. With that said, Tyson was proven to be a quite strong trainer, and at this point we kind of see the pattern here. Ash beats the recurring rival in the league, but is then beaten by someone way stronger, which pushes him to go to the next region. We're gonna skip the Battle Frontier, because that doesn't really count. In Sinnoh, we see that same formula, just with more rivals. Ash beat both Nando and Conway, minor rivals throughout Sinnoh, and then he had his big epic final battle against Paul. After that, they needed to continue the anime, but since the big battle of the league was Ash versus Paul, there was no way that they could have topped that. Even if Ash did beat Tobias and some other strong trainer through some Deus Ex Machina BS, none of those battles would mean anything compared to what the victory against Paul meant. So it makes the most sense to show that even though Ash beat his main rival in one of the best battles of the series, there are still bigger fish to fry. Ash's Sinnoh arc concluded when he beat Paul, and no other battle in that series could have meant more than that battle, so losing was really the only other option they had considering what they gave themselves to work with by matching them up this early in the tournament. If they had been matched up later in the tournament, say like the finals, and Ash won, I would be perfectly okay with that, because the final battle would actually mean something. But if he just cheeses his way through 2 more battles to win, then it doesn't mean anything. His win means nothing. Then we get to Unova. Black and White was not Ash's best time. I think that's well established at this point. But I think the reason that he lost to this goober Cameron was 2 factors. Dumb luck on Cameron's behalf, and Ash had way too many Pokemon that generation. He had 10 Pokemon, including Pikachu, in rotation this generation, as opposed to his usual 6. With more Pokemon than usual, none of them had as much training as in the other generations, because half of them were constantly in rotation. His Pokemon were simply undertrained compared to some of his other teams by the time of the league. Plus, if you look at Cameron's team, he was stacked. The dude had a Ferrothorn, Hydreigon, Samurott, and Lucario on his team, and even though he only had 5 Pokemon in this battle, the power level was still way higher than Ash's. And realistically speaking, everyone has slumps, where even after constant improvement, you sometimes don't do as good as you have in the past. Everything up until the end of Diamond and Pearl was pretty consistent for Ash's character, where he was almost always improving. Black and White was a bit of a slump, but X and Y and Sun and Moon are also pretty consistent from where he left off in Diamond and Pearl, leaving Black and White as the only outlier. And we all have off days, off leagues. It happens. If anything, I think it fits Ash's character, as he's often very forgetful. Using the Pokedex on Pokemon he's definitely seen before is probably just him refreshing his memory, because he's not that smart. He's 10 years old. Is it that good from a writing perspective? No. But in terms of how real humans act, absolutely, it makes sense. Oh, and as if I didn't suck the dick of X and Y enough, here we get to Kalos, the battle that many fans took to be a middle finger. Ash finally makes it to the finals of a Pokemon League, further than he's ever been before, but he still loses to Elan. I did a whole video on this when it first happened, and I used the argument that it's just another step in Ash's journey, that, he still has more adventures to be had, and then that's just how the show goes. He's just destined to lose. I don't 100% stand by that anymore, but I still think this loss can be rationalized. To explain this, I think we need to look at the XY series as a whole. It's a commonly held belief that Ash was way more competent in this series compared to the last one, but I think people confuse having fully evolved Pokemon with competency. Having strong Pokemon doesn't mean anything if you don't know how to use them correctly. Only 2 of his Pokemon had any real improvement that generation, those being Greninja and Goodra, while the others were just kind of there and didn't really do anything. Hawlucha had personality, which was interesting, but didn't really have any effect on its battling. Talonflame was just a generic bird, and Noivern, despite being one of the more powerful Pokemon in Gen 6, had like 5 battles tops in the series and lost all of them. Goodra's whole arc was that it was a weak little Goomy, but then evolved very quickly into a Goodra. It felt like they were building him up as Ash's ace for that region, but they did it way too early, so he wasn't even around for very long before he was released / given to the park ranger guy, so that Ash wouldn't be too powerful for the rest of the region. Greninja was the only one that had any real improvement, but a lot of that was pushed until the end with Ash Greninja, and I know I talk about this way too much on this channel, I'm sorry, but once Ash and Greninja mastered that form, it was barely used until the League, where it was basically the trump card transformation. With all the hype around it, all of his other Pokemon got pushed to the side, and even then, Ash Greninja got very little screen time in its mastered form. With that said, I don't think Ash Greninja was as mastered as it could have been, if you know what I'm saying. Like, they can use the form without going out of control and easily swept many opponents in the league using it, but there was still way more to unlock that simply wasn't there due to time constraints. I'm sure Ash Greninja could have been way more powerful. I guess what I'm trying to say is that Ash only mastered Ash Greninja to the point where it could be controlled, but never took it much further than that. With Alon's Mega Charizard X, he's had tons of time training with the Mega Charizard X form, as we've seen in the Mega Evolution specials, so I think the power gap is pretty clear. It makes perfect sense, at least to me, that Charizard was already way stronger than Ash Greninja. There was really not much of a contest here. But now we're getting closer and closer to an Alola League, and there's much debate as to whether Ash will win it or not once it rolls around. Personally, I don't think he's going to win, and that's just based on pure gut instinct. Sun and Moon has been much more character focused in regards to the side characters, and Ash has taken a much more casual approach this time around, with not even a full team yet 2 years into the series. The Alola League is way different from previous leagues because this time, anyone can join, regardless of island trials. So Ash can be up against anyone, including his classmates, Gladion, Kukui, some minor characters that have appeared here and there, Team Rocket can even join, and definitely Hau. If he's going to lose, then it's probably going to be to someone significant like Gladion, Kukui, or the most likely in my opinion, Hau, so at least it's not going to be some BS nameless character who shows up out of nowhere, like Tobias was. I still don't think Ash is going to win, and honestly, I don't want him to, and I know that's the very unpopular opinion. When I think of Ash winning a league, I think of this post I found years ago and I can't for the life of me find again, but it said something along the lines of, being a fan of Ash Ketchum is like being in prison, and every year somebody gives you a cake with broken glass in it. Every time you get the cake, you think, hey, this might not be so bad, maybe there won't be broken glass in it this time. Next thing you know, you wake up in the psych ward with cotton swabs in your mouth because you got your hopes up again. In other words, rooting for Ash every league is Einstein's definition of insanity. You're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. You might think that, hey, they're changing things up this time around due to how unconventional Sun and Moon has been, with Ash having caught 2 legendaries, one of which he released, but that's still a first regardless. But when it comes to tradition, Pokemon rarely breaks it. Every time they've tried to break tradition, such as attempting to get rid of Team Rocket circa Black and White, or when they replaced Brock for the Orange Islands, fans reacted negatively and they went back to the basics. The transition from Black and White to X and Y was the most obvious because of how much Black and White deviated from the first 4 generations, was received poorly, and they later went back to the basics with X and Y. It may seem as though Sun and Moon is breaking this trend, but even today, like 2 years into the series, there are still people who vehemently hate it for the same reasons from before it began. The point is, when Pokemon tries to break tradition, there may be people who like the changes, even the ones that are for the better, but the majority of people do not like change, and they have a history of backpedaling when this happens. I understand why Ash winning a league is a thing that fans have wanted for years. I get it. You know, seeing a character lose and lose over and over again, you'd think he deserves a win at this point. But I just don't think that it would fit Ash's goals and the way the writers have written it so far. Ash has said since day one that he wants to become a Pokemon master, and based on what the anime told us in the past, winning a league seems like a surefire way to do that, excluding Orange Islands because they don't count for some reason. But even now, we still don't know what it means to be a Pokemon master. I did a whole video on it years ago, and there is still no definitive answer. It's basically common knowledge at this point that when Ash becomes a Pokemon master, the show will end, but with no definitive answer as of yet, that it means the anime will keep going until they decide to end it naturally, or if Rika Matsumoto wants to stop voicing Ash for whatever reason in the future. The reason I don't want Ash to win a league isn't because I like seeing him lose like most people would want you to believe when they hear this kind of thing. In fact, I don't really care who wins or loses as long as the battles are entertaining, but because there is always room to improve as a trainer, and since we are nowhere close to the Pokemon series endgame as of now, there is no reason to give Ash one of the most prestigious honors in the Pokemon world this early on if they want to tell more story. Obviously, this is going to lead to power creep, something that a lot of long-running anime have had trouble with, and I'm looking at you, Dragon Ball. So if Ash wins, then where do we go from here? They could do the Champion League, something that was hinted at in Diamond and Pearl, but again, we're not close to the endgame yet, and I think it's been long enough to where they've probably abandoned that idea entirely. Assuming we've been building up to a win all these years, with Ash placing better and better in each league, with the exception of Unova, getting progressively better, if he actually did win, then he'd have to win every future league after that. The problem that would arise from this would be the Champions League, because it'd just become the same Pokemon League cycle we've been seeing since the start, where he'll challenge it, but then he'll lose again and again because they have to continue the show. Narratively speaking, it'd be best to save the Champions League for the final arc of Pokemon. Its final arc ever. Its endgame, if you will. But as of now, we are nowhere close to this endgame. I'd say if anything, we're probably about halfway, and they're gonna keep taking new approaches to each new generation to give Ash reasons not to win or for there to not be a league so as to pad things out for a little while. Whenever they do decide to end it off, they're probably gonna pull some bogus definition of Pokemon Master out of nowhere, maybe do a time skip or something for the last episode, and the Amore shipper in me just wants to see him end up with Serena and they have a child for the next series and could be the Boruto of Pokemon. However, I don't see the latter happening because they simply will not replace Ash ever, period. This video has gone on longer than I expected, and if I triggered you with my unpopular opinions regarding Ash Ketchum, then good. Call me an Ash Ketchum apologist all you want, I don't really care. But on the real though, if you disagree, then please leave an intelligent comment down below so we can have a genuine discussion about this topic. That's all for this video. I've been Matt CMG, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Chapter